Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at building this NH35 Submariner inspired by the Artisans De Genève rough mat. As you can see, there's quite a few parts for this build, starting off here with our oyster style bracelet, then the spring bars required to hold it in place, a 40mm Submariner style case, a rose gold rotor. This is actually 2 luminous pips for the bezel, 2 sets of hands just for good measure, an NH35 movement and an NH38 movement, a dark blue bezel insert, a decorated train bridge, a dial that's missing a few things, and the things that the dial is missing. Getting right into it, I'm going to place my movement holder down and then break out the NH35 movement. As you can see, we've continued with the second camera angle, and I'm going to go ahead and place the NH35 dial side down in the movement holder and secure it into place. I'm going to be doing a lot of work to this movement, and not all of it is going to be good, so strap in. I get off to a really bad start here, but don't realize it until weeks later in the process. The first thing I wanted to change on the movement was the balance wheel. The balance wheel oscillates back and forth, regulating the release of energy from the mainspring through a pallet fork and gear train. This controlled release directly affects the accuracy of the watch. The watch I'm basing this build off of uses the Rolex caliber 3130, which has a gold balance wheel with a blue neozirconium hairspring. I can't get a blue hairspring, but what I can get is a gold balance wheel that will fit the NH35. Or so I thought so. What I wanted to do was replace the gray balance wheel you see me removing here with the gold one out of an NH38 movement. Earlier and off camera, I took apart an NH38 and stole the gold balance wheel assembly from it. And what you see me doing here on camera is removing the balance wheel assembly from the NH35. And in a brief moment, you'll see me placing the gold balance wheel from the NH38 into the movement. It's a delicate operation. Have to be very careful not to damage the hairspring in any way, or else the balance assembly is basically useless. What you see me doing here is dangling the balance wheel assembly and trying to line up the balance staff with the hole that it goes into. Massive respect for all the actual watchmakers in the world, because this was not easy. You saw right there that there was a brief spark of life, and the balance wheel began to oscillate back and forth before stopping. That little bit of oscillation just shows that everything is lined up just as it should be, and with a little bit of power provided to the watch, it should come to life. So I'll go ahead and wind the watch here, and there she goes. So originally I thought this was great news. Everything looked good and the balance wheel was oscillating back and forth with no issues. But sometimes looks can be deceiving, and once I put the movement on the time grapher, I saw the error of my ways. I was getting time grapher numbers that were absolutely terrible. 7 millisecond beat errors, 500 seconds a day gained, amplitude that was so low it couldn't be read. Of course, me being me, thought a little bit of regulation would solve the issue, but that was pretty wishful thinking. I actually reached out to Seiko asking if the NH35 and the NH38 balance wheel were compatible. The answer I received is as follows, quote, The balance wheel of the NH35 and NH38 are technically interchangeable, however we cannot guarantee the quality after the swap as we have never tested that purpose. So officially our answer is that we cannot recommend to swap. Close quote. After hearing that, I figured he's saying it technically should be possible and I must have just messed up during the swap. So I ordered 3 more NH38 movements to see if another balance wheel would work. Once they arrived, I very carefully disassembled the host and the donor movements and swapped the balance wheels. I then reassembled everything and stuck it back on the time grapher, expecting the results to change, but unfortunately they were even worse. Realizing that this swap probably wasn't meant to be, I eventually swapped back to the NH35 balance wheel later on. I'm by no means admitting defeat, however at this time the gold balance wheel has eluded me. The balance wheel was not the only thing that I wanted to change out for this build. What you see me doing here is removing the stock train wheel bridge to replace it with a decorated one. To accomplish this, I needed to remove the automatic rotor, and then there's 2 screws that hold in the train wheel bridge. Once those are unscrewed and removed, the stock bridge comes right out. This bridge is responsible for holding wheels and gears in place that are involved in the automatic winding system. In a reference picture, I saw that the rough mat had some circular Côte de Genève on one of the bridges. I'd previously seen a similar part available for the NH35, but when I went to the website to purchase it, they were out of stock. I contacted the website and they said they would not have new ones until March. Mind you, it was November of 2023 at this time. So I began to look elsewhere, but nobody had anything similar available. I was willing to try to make my own, but realized that the Côte de Genève was not just applied to the OEM bridge, it was a new part used to do the job of 2 parts combined. It would have been too much for me to try. There was an option to buy a bridge with straight cut Côte de Genève, and I almost pulled the trigger, but decided to wait. And while I waited, I became somewhat fascinated with the manufacturing process. Developed in the late 19th century in Switzerland, the striping pattern was not originally designed for a decorative purpose, but rather for functionality. The rough striping was created as a way to collect dust particles inside the case and prevent them from entering the movement itself. Technically, what I'm using is Côte Circulares. I need to hire somebody to pronounce all these French words. Côte de Genève is also known as Geneva stripes, Geneva waves, Glashütte stripes, or damascening. It, along with perlage, are quintessential finishing practices used in high horology. You can see here the circular striping pattern I'm referring to, and also how much bigger the aftermarket bridge is from the OEM one. The bridge basically covers up the entire back of the movement, and once it's all lined up, all that's left to do is screw it in place using 2 blued screws. These screws were provided with the bridge and have undergone a heat treating process in which they take on a nice blue color. This is a pretty common practice in the world of luxury watches, along with black polishing screws, which is the practice of polishing a screw to the point it has a mirror finish. What you see me doing here is trying to line up this bridge with the 2 screw points, along with some other jewels that show through it. This is going to take me a couple minutes, so why don't I tell you about the inspiration behind this build. You've heard me mention things like Artisans De Genève and rough mat in the video and may be unfamiliar with these things. Founded in 2005, Artisans De Genève is a watchmaking company based in Geneva that offers an exclusive timepiece modification service for private clients. Their modifications are carried out exclusively in their workshops in Switzerland by highly qualified independent craftsmen. Just to be clear, Artisans De Genève is an artisan's workshop that does not manufacture or sell watches. They offer a personalization service. The individual looking to work with them will need to provide Artisans De Genève the watch they wish to have personalized. Artisans De Genève won't source the watch for the client. This is for legal purposes. In addition to providing your own watch for customization, there are some other rules. The watch must be authentic with proof, must not be more than 5 years old, and must have never been polished. Failing any of these rules means that the watch is no longer eligible for customization. The next logical question then is, what can they do to a watch? And the answer is basically anything. Almost all of their watches feature some kind of skeletonization or modification to the movement, with full beveling and polishing, redesigning and repainting of dials, total customization of hands and their shape, flame bluing bridges, hands, rotors, and screws, complete reshaping and refinishing of cases, gem set bezels, lugs, and crown guards, use of exclusive materials like tantalum, bakelite, aventurine, and all forms of gold, patina, and faux aging. Nearly every aspect of a watch seems like it can be worked on, customized, or completely changed. It takes a special kind of person to buy an already expensive watch and then have it shipped to Switzerland to have it turned into something completely bespoke. Artisans De Genève has worked with many high-profile clients over the years, such as ex-Formula One driver Rubens Barrichello, musical icons like Lenny Kravitz and Adam Levine, as well as athletes like Andrea Pirlo. Look at that, we even got some Italian in this video. Though it seems a fair share of their clients like to remain anonymous, known only by their initials or an alias like Mr. BS or simply the client. Earlier, I removed the stock rotor from the NH35 movement, and much like everything else on the back of the movement, I'm going to be making a change. The reference watch features a 24-karat gold rotor, which of course makes it nice and heavy while giving it a great look. I don't have the type of money to put a 24K gold rotor in the back of any of my builds, so mine is just gold plated. There isn't a lot of reference material for this particular watch, but it is mentioned that it has a yellow gold rotor. However, the few reference photos I was able to find made it look like it had a rose gold rotor. Now, I'm a much bigger fan of rose gold, so in the end I decided to use that finish on the rotor. And of course, keeping in the theme, the rotor also features the same Côte de Genève as the bridge does. And with that rotor now tightened into place, the modifications on the movement have been completed. With the movement modifications now complete, I can move on to modifying the hands. Longtime viewers will know that I'm a big fan of the Mercedes style hands, and they are predominantly shown on the channel. However, in this case, I'm going to be using a set of sword style hands to best emulate the reference watch. There is plenty of sword style hands out on the market, and I ended up picking this style up. The biggest issue is that they are painted red, and I need them to be orange. So of course, wishing to make things hard on myself, I decided I was going to hand paint the hour hand and the tip of the second hand with the same paint I was going to use for the hour markers and for the dive markers on the bezel. You can see me carrying out the first step in this process here, as I remove the loom. This was done not only because the loom would be ruined when I went to paint the hands, but because it was green and terrible. It lacked longevity and any real brightness as well. My initial plan was to just scrape the loom off the backside of the hands and preserve as much paint as possible. Though the loom was more stubborn than I anticipated, this plan originally worked, until I made the mistake of running the X-Acto knife down the inside of the minute hand, scratching the paint. So I took a second, accepted my mistake, and then dropped the minute hand in some solvent to dissolve any remaining loom as well as the paint on it. Moving on to the hour hand, I began doing the same process and actually had better results with the loom coming off rather easily. You'll see that the hand is black near the hole and red towards the pointy bit. I wanted to do my best to preserve this and elected to mask off the black part with a bit of masking tape. However, I soon realized no matter how hard I tried, I could not get the masking tape straight and that the color was going to bleed under. So, like the minute hand, I took it and dropped it in some solvent and dissolved all of the paint off the hand. I elected to not show the painting process, more so to just protect the cameras from any paint particles that would be flying through the air. Painting the minute hand was rather simple. It was set up on a whittled down toothpick and then hit with a gloss black enamel. Painting the hour hand was a little bit more difficult, as I was not too happy with the original color I got, and then elected to dissolve that color off, spray a base coat of white, then the enamel orange, before clear coating the final result. You may have noticed when introducing the parts that the dial did not have any hour markers on it. This is because I wanted the hour markers to match the color of the hands, so when ordering parts, I asked the dial maker to not attach the hour markers to the dial and also not to loom them. He of course agreed because it's less work and material for him for the same price. Though he was kind enough to ship them nicely packaged in this egg carton-like contraption. I went about airbrushing these hour markers almost the same way I went about painting the hands. I took a little bit of Rodico and placed it on the tip of a toothpick, and then secured the backside of the marker into that Rodico. Then I was able to stand up the toothpick in another plot of Rodico just to make sure that I could paint it from all sides. One thing I had to make sure of was that none of the Rodico was covering up the sides of the marker, as obviously this would act as a form of masking. Eventually, once I got enough markers secured and set up, I was ready for paint. I expected the airbrushing of the markers to be a pain because I expected that the air pressure would blow the markers off the Rodico and I'd have to go searching around my garage on my hands and knees to find them. Lucky for me, this wasn't the case. What was the case, at least for the first attempt, was that the finished product lacked any fluorescence or vibrance and looked a little muted and even brown. So again, I broke out the solvent, dissolved all the paint off the markers, reset everything up, and then hit the markers with a coat of a white base, then the fluorescent orange, and then clear coated the finished product. I'm going to go ahead here and speed up the video All that's left in this part is me stacking up the rest of the hour markers on toothpicks and then setting them up to be airbrushed. As I mentioned in the beginning, this build is going to be broken up into several parts. In the next video, we'll be looking at relooming the hands, as well as adding a little bit of orange to the dial and all the struggles that came with that. Just want to give a quick thank you to all of you watching these videos and supporting the channel. We're slowly creeping up at that 1,000 subscriber mark. Looking forward to hitting that milestone. If anybody has any questions or would like to commission a build, please don't hesitate to reach out at goldenstatewatchshop@gmail.com or on my Instagram at goldenstatewatchshop. And for the first time in channel history, we will not close out with some shots of the watch in natural light. But hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.